You ever been through a change so big it feels like your entire world is just being packed away into boxes? Well, today we're going to dive into a really powerful sermon from Reverend John Hahn at First Mesquite United Methodist Church. It uses an ancient story to give us a kind of timeless guide for navigating loss and building something new.
It all kicks off with this number, 2. 20 years ago, when Reverend Hahn came to the United States, that's how many suitcases he was allowed to bring. His entire life, everything he had and knew, had to be squeezed down into just 2 pieces of luggage.
I mean, just think about that for a second. 28 years of your life, all your memories, your belongings, your whole identity, all of it has to be compressed. It's this feeling of just profound loss and this huge challenge. How do you start completely over with only what you can physically carry?
So when he gets to Texas, it's not just culture shock, it's the weather. It was like 110 degrees one day, and then suddenly it drops to 60 the next. So disorienting. It's really the perfect metaphor for that feeling of being unmoored, of losing all your familiar reference points.
And what's so wild is that this very personal, very modern experience of being set adrift, it actually echoes a much older and much, much larger story. The story of an entire nation facing that exact same kind of crisis.
Yeah, we're talking about the ancient Israelites. After 400 years of brutal slavery in Egypt, they are suddenly, miraculously free. But here's the thing, freedom isn't a destination, not yet anyway. Right now, it's a huge, empty wilderness. They've escaped one reality, only to find themselves completely lost in another, staring down a future that is terrifyingly uncertain. I mean, the scale of their crisis was just immense. They've got no food, no water, and absolutely no system for survival. There are no laws, no government, no trained army to speak of. Their leader, Moses, he's totally untested in this role. They had lost the horrible certainty of their old life, and there was nothing to replace it.
So what do you do in a situation like that, when you're facing that much freedom and that much fear all at once? Well, their reaction tells us something really fascinating and kind of dangerous about human psychology when we're facing a massive change.
Get this. This is what the Israelites actually said. It is a truly shocking statement. They're wishing for death, back in the land where they were slaves. And why? Because at least there they had pots of meat and bread. They had something familiar, something predictable, even if it cost them their freedom.
They were romanticizing their own oppression. In the terrifying quiet of the wilderness, the memory of slavery somehow became comforting. And this is such a powerful warning about how, in our own times of crisis, we can get trapped by nostalgia for a past that wasn't even good for us just because it was familiar.
So this moment of crisis, out there in the wilderness, it presented a fundamental choice. And it wasn't just about how to survive, but about what kind of society they were going to build from scratch. And there were 2 very different models on the table.
On the one hand, the Egyptian way. It's all they knew, right? A top-down system where one ruler, the pharaoh, has absolute power. A society built on force and fear. But on the other hand, the wilderness way was something totally radical. No king, but a shared constitution, the 10 Commandments. A society built not on fear, but on relationships and trust.
And this brings us to the absolute turning point. The people are starving, they're complaining, they're basically on the verge of a full-blown rebellion. So, in this critical test of leadership, what does God, through Moses, give them to start building this brand new kind of society?
The answer is so simple, but it changes everything. Not an army to control them, not a crown to establish authority. Food. To build a new world based on trust, the very first act of leadership was to meet the people's most basic, fundamental need. See, it wasn't about power, it was about care.
So what on earth does this ancient story have to teach us today? How do we apply these lessons when we're lost in our own wildernesses, personal or collective? Well, the sermon connects this whole thing to a really powerful modern concept.
The goal is what Martin Luther King Jr. famously called the beloved community. And what Reverend Hahn argues is that this wasn't just Dr. King's dream, it's the very kind of society God intended from the beginning. A community built not on power dynamics, but on justice, trust, and a real, genuine love for one another.
So this gives us a kind of playbook, right? A clear path forward. First, you have to acknowledge what's been lost, but you absolutely cannot get trapped romanticizing a past that no longer serves you. Second, you focus on building relationships, real connections based on trust, not force. And third, you lead, whether it's your family or your community, not by grabbing for power, but by meeting needs and sharing love.
And this final quote from Reverend Hahn it really nails the whole point. When you're leading your family, your team, your community through a tough time, The first and most important thing isn't authority, it's not power, it's love. It's that simple foundational act of caring for each other.
And that leaves us with one final and pretty crucial question. We all face our own wildernesses, those times of deep uncertainty and loss. In those moments, when the old world is gone and the new one isn't clear yet, what are we going to choose to build? Will we fall back on the old rules of power, or will we try to build a beloved community, one built on love?